Hi, my dear students. Today we are going to see part 2 of important questions from Contract Act. So part 1, if you have not seen yet, I will give the link in the description. Go and see the part 1 first, then come to part 2. So this I am going to explain from my question bank book, which you can buy it from letspassca.com, letspassca.com. You can go there and you can buy. It is 160 rupees, including shipping charges. It will be 210 rupees. It will come to your house directly. We will ship it from here. So today we are going to question number 10, that is from section 8 of the Contract Act. So I'll just zoom it so that you can also see. Okay. Shambhu Dayal started self-service system in his shop. Srimati Prakash entered the shop, took the basket, and after taking the articles of her choice into the basket, reached the cashier for payments. Cashier refuses to accept the price. Can Shambhu Dayal be compelled to sell the articles to Srimati Prakash? So what is the question? One lady walks into a self-service store. Okay, she picks some goods and she want to bill it, but the cashier refused to accept it for some reasons. Okay, maybe. So is the store compelled to sell to Srimati Prakash? Is the store is offering Srimati Prakash, or if the store is only inviting for the offer? So this is the case. So you all know it's only invitation to the offer. Display of goods is only invitation to offer. So how to write this answer? See, the answer is very easy, but how to write the answer? So as we all know, it's a case study based question. So provision, analysis and conclusion. Provision, invitation to the offer. The offer should be distinguished from invitation to the offer. This is first point. The offer is a final expression of willingness. You all know. We just now studied in the first part. So offer is a final expression of willingness. But invitation to the offer is only what? For negotiation, correct? So in invitation to the offer, there is only willing to negotiate. So it is not offer. It only invites the other party to negotiate. Analysis. Display of goods with a price in a self-service shop is merely an invitation to the offer. It is in no sense there is offer. Okay. So in the given case, so analysis law always what you should write. Okay, what happened and in the given case. In the given case, Srimati Prakash, by selecting some articles, approaching the cashier for payment, okay, it's not an offer, it's only, okay, invitation to the offer, okay. Conclusion, if the cashier does not accept the price, interested buyer cannot compel them to sell. This is the final answer. This is the conclusion. Okay. Then the next question from section 9 of the Contract Act, which we have seen already in a different question. Again, the same question in a different pattern is asked here. In part 1, in types of contract, we have seen the same question, but the same question here has some more different answer. Question is, a coolie in the uniform picks up the luggage, okay, and the other party remains silent. That is, Mr. R is the other party. Okay, so the coolie is picking the luggage from Mr. R without being asked by R, but R allows it. Examine whether the coolie is entitled to receive money from R. Very good question. What is the answer? It's an implied contract. So in the part 1, the same question we told which contract it is. The answer is implied contract. Now, explanation for this. Okay. Implied contract comes into existence by implication. More often, the implication is by the law or by action. So section 9 of the Contract Act contemplates such implied contract when it lay down. So far, such proposal acceptance is made otherwise than by words. So what is implied contract? Acceptance and proposal made other than by words. So the promise is said to be implied. In the present case, it's an implied contract and R must pay for the service of the coolie. See, if he wants, no, he should have stopped it. But he have not stopped. He accepted the coolie service, hence he have to pay. Then next question. This is a social agreement and etc. That one. Mr. Ramesh promised to pay 50,000 to his wife. Okay. So his wife name is Lalli. So that if I give that money, she will spend on her birthday. Lalli insisted husband to make a written agreement if he really loved her. Ramesh made a written agreement and agreement was registered under the law. Ramesh failed to make the specific payment. Okay. And Lalli filed a suit against Ramesh and recovered the promised amount. Referring to the applicable provision, whether Lalli succeed. This is the question. Answer is all the agreement, okay, cannot be said to have the contract. Why? Because agreements should be enforceable by law, right? So it should create a legal obligation. So here it is a social agreement, right? So it cannot be enforced in law. But there is something which we should understand. So first we will understand the answer. There must be an intention on the part of the parties to create a legal relationship between them. Social and domestic agreements are not enforceable by law. Hence, they do not form contract. So, social agreement doesn't form contract. Analysis. In the given question, Ramesh promised to pay 50,000 to wife so that she can spend on her birthday. However, subsequently, Ramesh failed to fulfill. Okay, Mrs. Lalli filed a suit against Ramesh. Conclusion. In the given situation, wife will not able to recover the amount as it is a social agreement and the parties does not intend to create a legal obligation. But since the agreement is made in writing and is registered, it will qualify a contract. Okay. So the thing is, please understand, you have to read section 25 for understanding this question in full. So this question has two answers. One answer, it's a social agreement. Another answer, since it's registered, it forms a contract. Hence, it is enforceable. For example, gift deed. Gift deed and all, for example, the father is gifting to son. If it is registered, it binds the father. Okay. Next. Now we'll go to section 11. Ishan, okay, a 16-year-old boy was studying engineering college. Okay, 16 or 17-year-old studying engineering college. Okay, on March, he took a loan of 2 lakhs from Vishal for payment of his college fees and agrees so that no 30th May he will repay it. So we can keep this as 2019 and this as 2020. So that no will be in the present scenario. So Ishan, that minor, so minor got some loan from another person, rupees 2 lakh for his education, and he didn't repaid it. So the other party who lend, can he recover? So Ishan is the person who's having wealth of 15 lakhs. So Vishal is the person who lent the money to Ishan. So what is the answer? Provision. Section 11, okay, of the Contract Act. Every person who is competent of contract, who is a person who is competent to contract? Majority, age of majority, and who is of sound mind and not disqualified. So you have two things. So competent person. So he should be major, he should be of sound mind, and he should be not disqualified. Okay. But if a person is of less than 18, so if he is a minor, he is not competent to contract. So in this given question, minor, Ishan is a minor, so he is not competent to contract. So it is already mentioned in Mohiri B versus Dharmadas Ghosh, correct? So under section 68, okay, there is a liability for the minor. Okay, for what reasons he is liable? If the necessaries of life is supplied to him. So it says, though the minor is not personally liable to pay the price of necessaries supplied to him or money lent to him, but from his property he is liable. Okay, so the person, the supplier or lender will be entitled to claim the money or price which are necessaries, okay, suited for his condition, necessary suited for his condition. Hence, the liability of the minor is only to the extent of minor's property. So, he is not personally liable, his properties are liable. Conclusion, thus according to the above provision, Vishal is entitled to recover the money which he has lent loan for Ishan for payment of college fees when he was minor. What is the next question? Though a minor is not competent to contract, nothing in the Contract Act prevent him from making other party bound to minor. Minor can be beneficiary or can take benefit out of contract. Though a minor is not competent to contract, nothing in the Contract Act prevents him from making the other party bound to the minor. For example, promissory note duly executed in favor of minor is not void and can be sued upon by him, because though he is incompetent to contract, he may be a beneficiary. Okay, a minor cannot become partner in the partnership firm, but however, with the consent of all partners, he can be admitted for the benefits of the partnership. So, if he is a beneficiary, he still can sue others. Then the next question is straight question. Coercion. Explain the term coercion. What are the effects of coercion under Indian Contract Act? So coercion, section 15. Section 15 is coercion. Coercion is committing or threatening to commit any act forbidden by Indian Penal Code, or unlawful detaining or threatening to detain any property to prejudice. Prejudice means not in the good interest. Prejudice of any other person. Whatever with an intention of causing any person to enter into a contract. So basically, what are the words you should use? Threatening. That is the main word. Threatening is the main word. Okay. And forbidden by IPC, Indian Penal Code. Now, effects of coercion under section 19. So, section 15, section 19, you should write together. Contract induced by coercion is voidable. What is the first point? It is voidable at the option of the party. So, voidable. Affected party can make it void, or he can accept to valid. As the consequence of the rescission of voidable contract, the party rescinding, okay, a void contract should, if he has received any benefits thereunder from the other party to the contract, restore such benefit. So you should give it back. Okay. Third one. So if he is making the contract as rescind, that means he is cancelling the contract. Whatever the amount, for example, somebody is threatening me to sell my house at very less price. So I got the less price and gave my house. Now, if I am making it void, if I am going to say this is void in the court, then I have to re-give the price which I already received. So this is called that one. So if I am rescinding, okay, if I am rescinding, what I should do? I should restore the benefit. So the money which I obtained from him earlier is called the benefit. I should restore the benefit. The person to whom money has been paid or anything delivered by coercion, he should repay or return. That means what? He should return my house back and I should give the money which I received from him. So this is coercion. Now what is undue influence? Discuss the essentials of undue influence under the contract. So essentials of undue influence is as follows. Relationship between the parties. That means the person who is going to get influenced and the person who is influencing him should be having very good relationship. So unknown party can do coercion, but only known party can do undue influence. This is first point. Second point, position to dominate the will. That means I should be in the position to influence you. Dominate the will means I should be in the position to influence you. Okay, you will be doing some act which is in favor of me. Okay. Then real and apparent authority. So I should have authority. That means I should be a master and you should be a servant. Kind of authority should be there. Okay. So doctor, patient kind of. Then fiduciary relationship. You should have confidence on me. You should have a confidence on me. A guru. Okay. A spiritual leader. A father and son. Okay. Doctor or advocate and his client. Okay. Husband, wife. They have that fiduciary relationship. The trust and confidence you will be having. Then mental distress. Undue influence can be used against the person to get his consent on a contract where a mental capacity of a person is temporarily or permanently, okay, it's not unstable because of illness or old age, etc. Then unconscionable bargains. Okay. So what is this? See, consciousness, you right? What I can say, like no. Manasachiki virodhama kind of, okay, from your conscience, okay. Now, the parties of the contract in the position to dominate the will. So, Manasachi illama, okay. Is, for example, I am in a very bad situation in the COVID time, Okay, I'm coming and bargaining. Okay, sorry, I'm coming and asking, borrowing from you, and you are charging me very high rate of interest. Okay, see, I want some money. I want to survive, so I'm coming and asking you some money. You are charging 36% rate of interest, so which is very high. That is the one. Okay, so these are the things which is very important in undue influence. Okay. So the burden of proof. The burden of proof in the absence of use of the dominant position to obtain unfair advantage will lie on the party who is in the position dominant of the will. For example, if I find a case against you because you only dominated my will. Okay. So it is under you. It is the proof is burden of proof is on you that you should prove that you have not dominated the will. You have not used undue influence. So I can easily file a case against you. It is you to prove that you have not influenced me. So then we'll go for fraud. Mere silence, does it amounts to fraud? So whether the mere silence amounts to fraud or not, that is a question. Answer, mere silence not amounting to fraud, but sometimes it will become amount to fraud. We will study the both things, okay? Mere silence as to the fact likely to affect the willingness of a person to enter into the contract is not fraud. But where the duty, very important, where there is a duty of a person to speak, but if he is not speaking, okay, his silence amounts to speech, then it is a fraud. So it is a rule in the law, mere silence does not amount to fraud. A contracting party is not in a duty bound to disclose the whole truth to the other person. But if the other person asking him, at that time he is silent, okay, then it amounts to fraud, okay. Exception, where the circumstances of the case are such that regard being made, that means he has been asked, it is a duty of the person keeping silence to speak. Duty to speak arises when one contracting party repose trust and confidence in the other, or where one party has to depend upon the good sense of the other. Okay, where the silence is itself is equivalent to speech. In these two cases, silence amounts to fraud sometimes. Okay, it's not all time. See, in the Contract Act, fraud is a very important question. Okay, so next question is, P sells by auction to Q a horse which P knows is unsound. The horse appears to be sound, but P knows about the unsoundness. So on that time it is sound, but actually it is unsound. Okay, so the seller, the owner of the horse, know about it. Okay. Now, is the contract is valid in the following circumstances? P says nothing about the unsoundness of the horse to Q. First point. Okay. So that means he kept quiet. Okay. And P also doesn't ask anything. Second scenario. P says nothing about it to Q. P's daughter, who has just come of age. Next. If Q says to P, if you do not deny, I shall assume the horse is of sound. Next. So this is three scenarios. First scenario. So according to section 7, mere silence is not amounting to fraud. That or not we know. Okay. Now, unless there is a circumstances, that's what we studied in the provision. Now we will come to the answer. First question. P does not say anything about the horse. This contract is valid. Okay. He is merely having silence. He is not doing anything. Okay. So Q should have asked, but Q has not asked. Here, it is not a duty of the seller to disclose the defects. Second, this contract is void since it becomes P's duty to tell Q about the unsoundness of the horse because the fiduciary relationship exists between P and his daughter Q. Here, P's silence is equivalent to speech. Now, what is this P and Q's relationship in this question? Q is the daughter of P. So P is the father, Q is the daughter. But Q just now attained the age of majority. She is now able to contract. Okay, contracting capacity is there. But father should not cheat his own daughter, right? So there is a fiduciary relationship between the father and the daughter. So in this scenario, since there is a fiduciary relationship between the father and the daughter, okay, here there is a duty of you to speak, okay, and here you should know, you should tell the daughter, see, it's of unsound mind, etc. Okay, see, for example, how to support this answer, I will tell you here. The previous question we studied, no? The duty of to speak arises when one contracting party, okay, that is in the question Q, reposes trust and confidence on the other. Okay, that is father. Okay, how do Q know my father himself will cheat? Okay, next. Third scenario, Q ask P. Okay, if you are silent, I am going to think that your horse is of sound mind. This contract, okay, is not valid because P silence is amount to speech. Okay, so if P is silent in this scenario, that means he has done fraud. So these are the three cases. Understood? Uh, we can also study some more points. We can also some more points we can add up. Okay, contract of insurance, contract of marriage, and family settlement, allotment of shares. In these cases, that silence amounts to fraud. So these are the cases, additional cases you can add. Okay. So for example, in contract of insurance, the other party, the person who is going to get insured, you should tell all the things about him or the things, etc. Okay. Then in the marriage, if there is any problem about the persons and all, should be properly disclosed. In family settlements also like that. And joint stock company, a company should disclose all material facts to the prospective buyers. So with this, we stop here today's important questions. Kindly share these videos with your friends and ask them to study. You can buy the books, which is very cheap. You can take it, and so that no, when you hear the class, you can have the book in your hand and you can study that. Thank you so much.